I'm Grant Murphy. I'm with the Centre for Sustainable Municipalities at Fleming College. My role there is manager and researcher. We work on a variety of issues for municipal or related to municipal infrastructure, both in the applied research side as well as training and education. So primarily we're here to enable and assist municipalities with some of the long-term issues related to infrastructure. Well, I've been involved in municipal engineering for over 25 years, both as a manager as well as a professional engineer. My role has really focused on three things: the supply of clean drinking water, treatment of wastewater, and then finally stormwater, which is really the key aspect when it comes to flooding, flood-related issues in an urban environment. Well, from a municipal engineering perspective, obviously there is a lot of work that takes place to ensure that properties are not damaged during high rainfall events, and that includes the proper design of underground infrastructure. Stormwater management is about getting rid of the water that is around properties and where it's going to be placed back into the watercourse. So essentially protecting homes from flooding. Well, certainly the current concern is focusing on climate change and adapting to the changes that are happening in the environment. Primarily it focuses on the more intensive rain storms or rain events that are happening more frequently than they used to. And that means the type of infrastructure that we have in our municipalities, urban environments, as well as in the rural environment as well, really preparing that infrastructure to handle larger volumes of rainfall more frequently than it has in the past. And if the systems aren't designed properly and rebuilt to meet these new challenges, that will inevitably cause more flooding events for homeowners and property owners alike. Certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been more emphasis by municipalities to look for ways to provide incentives to property owners, whether it be focusing on development of stormwater utility rate structures to help pay for upgrades to stormwater management facilities, or to try and encourage property owners to either manage the stormwater on their property more effectively or protect their basements and their property from backflow in through the sanitary system. So really two components. One is more effective stormwater management techniques, as well as protecting property owners from wastewater backup. Yeah, certainly what we've found is that if you can reach out to the property owners and actually have a conversation with them and demonstrate some of the techniques that would help them protect their property. So whether it be something as simple as making sure your downspouts are directed away from your foundation, or paying attention to the grading around your property, or more complicated issues such as changing the plumbing in your house to actually prevent sewage from backing up into it. Having someone at your house or at your property to talk to you and show you these examples certainly goes a long way to raising awareness, and particularly encouraging people to actually take the action, because that is a fundamental issue. You can read a lot of information, you can see a lot of information on the internet or through television, but if you're really there, if you've got someone there to talk to you about it and show you tangible examples, that will leave an impression and certainly help you implement these changes and protect your property. Well, the answer to your question is one answer with three parts. And from a municipal engineering perspective, being aware of the drainage around your property is significant. So three quick examples. One is being aware of what's out in your street. So are there catch basins that are in the curb line? In other words, someplace where the water is going to be draining to from your property. Are there ditches around your property? Are there swales? And in each one of those cases, you want to take a little bit of time and make sure that you're paying attention to them. So if you see a catch basin, which is the grate that's on the road, clogged with debris, go out and clean it. It helps not only protect you, but also the surrounding property owners and your neighbors. It's part of your community infrastructure. Two, if you have a culvert that goes under your driveway, take a look at that. Make sure that it's not overgrown or collapsed, because again, that causes blockages and potential drainage issues in your community. And thirdly, take a look at your rear lots. So property owners love building tool sheds, raised gardens, and other things that pretty up your property, make it look great. But unfortunately, some of these things cause drainage issues. So be sure not to block those rear lot swales, because it does affect not only you, but your neighbors. And so it's part of that community infrastructure. So protect, be aware, and help preserve that community infrastructure. Well, I'm going to speak from personal experience. We live in a very old century home. It's got a stone rubble foundation, and when we bought the house, we knew that the basement had regular seepage issues in the springtime. And a hard lesson learned for us was that, like a lot of homeowners, we do love using our basement for storage. And so we had material and trinkets and whatnot stored in boxes, in cardboard boxes in our basement. And one spring, the sump pump that was there failed. Water came into our basement. We had a foot of water in our basement. Now, we didn't lose anything too terrible, but it boils down to the amount of stress that you're under. You have to go in, you have to clean it, you have to make sure that the things that are there, whether they're in okay condition, you may have to get rid of. And in certain cases, they're meaningful to you. So it adds personal stress and psychological stress to you as a property owner and home. After the fact, you're always paying attention for the next big rainstorm, and certainly that adds to your level of stress as well as a homeowner. But the things we learned from that was raise your personal effects off of the floor, put them in containers that aren't going to be affected by flooding or rainwater, and for sure don't put furniture or other pieces of meaningful possessions down in your basement. Yeah, certainly. We actually went under a fair amount of renovations in our house about 10 years after the fact. But we added additional sump pumps in our basement. We fixed the wall that was causing the seepage into the basement. We redirected downspouts away from the foundation to ensure that any runoff from our roof was actually being directed away from the property. And in a couple of cases, we actually installed some rain gardens, which allows the water to be discharged away from the property, but it also allows it to infiltrate into the ground. So double benefit, one of which is protecting your property, but secondly, infiltrating groundwater back into the system before it gets polluted when it gets discharged out to the road. Well, I think dealing with stress and psychological effects, Certainly, it's good as these events happen more frequently, and if you have property damage that may have only happened once in your lifetime, this might be happening on a more reoccurring time frame. Yeah, it's gonna become more of an issue, and as you know, climate change as well as the frequency of these types of flood events happens, yeah, people are going to get stressed out about their lives. Now, there are things they can do to hopefully minimize that. One of the things that people can do to try and reduce their stress is to get engaged with the Home Flood Risk Assessment Training Program. So in other words, have an assessor come into your house, provide some feedback and tangible activities for them to do in order to reduce the likelihood of flooding in their property. With the renovations we've made to the house, it's certainly made a big difference. Now, that in terms of what we store down in our basement, we still take the same practices. We don't put things down in the basement that mean a lot to us, and recognize that there still are risks associated with flooding. They will never go away, but you need to be aware of activities that you can do to minimize the damage, potential damage that could happen in the future. I think the takeaway message is that you are not an island unto yourself. You are part of a broader community, and stormwater management, rainfall, and flood events is something that happens to your community. It just doesn't happen to you necessarily by yourself. So there are things that you can do to help your own property as well as your neighbors. And I think things such as, again, as I mentioned, things such as looking out on your street, seeing if you've got blocked catch basins, checking out behind your property to make sure there's nothing that's blocking flow of water across and through your property so that it can escape to a water course. Those simple things mean a great deal to the community, and as well potentially reducing the risk to your own home.